Imagine waking up to a world where rain never stops. Not for an hour. Not for a night. Not for a day. But for entire weeks, sometimes months, where the sky becomes a drum and the ground becomes a river. Most people today panic if their shoes get soaked walking from the car to the front door. But centuries ago, Native American tribes across North America faced storms that would wash modern cities off the map. And somehow, they didn't just survive, they stayed dry, warm, and protected for days in endless, merciless rain. How did they do it? The truth is far stranger and far more ingenious than most people realize. Long before waterproof jackets, synthetic fibers, or plastic tarps, Native Americans turned forests, animals, rivers, and even smoke into tools of survival. The first raindrops of a season weren't a problem. They were a signal, a reminder of traditions passed down through bloodlines. When the clouds thickened and thunder traveled through the valleys like an ancient heartbeat, entire families began to prepare for a world soaked in water. Men reinforced shelters, women sealed garments with oils, and elders tested the weather with a kind of instinct no modern meteorologist could match. Picture a longhouse in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by towering cedar trees older than every country on Earth. The rain crashes against the wooden shingles with the force of a waterfall. Yet inside, a hunter sits sharpening a blade, his clothing completely dry. His boots, made of smoked deer hide, do not leak. His cloak, constructed from cedar bark fibers, repels water like a shield. A thin layer of bear grease rubbed into the fibers forms a natural waterproof membrane. The rain outside could fall for 10 days straight. He would remain untouched by a single drop. But clothing was only the first layer of defense. Take the tribes of the eastern woodlands. When storms rolled in from the Atlantic, they sealed their homes with a mixture of mud, moss, and tree resin. The resin hardened like nature's own glue, making the structures so watertight that the sound of rain became a distant hum instead of a violent roar. Children slept peacefully, wrapped in woven blankets treated with animal fat, while fires burned low and steady, their smoke drifting up through carefully carved vents. Sometimes, survival depended on more than just structure, it depended on skill. The Cherokee had a technique passed down for generations, heating pine resin until it melted into a thick, sticky substance, then brushing it onto moccasins and outer garments. Once cooled, the resin formed a barrier that could withstand storms for days. Warriors could travel through forests where rain fell so heavily the ground became a swamp, yet their feet stayed dry. Modern hikers with $300 waterproof boots would have envied this ancient engineering. Then there were the Inuit of the far north, who faced storms not only full of rain but of icy needles carried by Arctic winds. Their waterproofing didn't come from plants, it came from the sea. They crafted parkas from seal intestines, which are naturally water repellent. When stitched together with sinew so tight that not even air could slip through, the garments became nature's version of Gore-Tex. Hunters paddled across frigid oceans in kayaks covered with stretched sealskin, the water sliding off like oil on glass. But waterproof clothing was only half the secret. The other half was knowledge of rain itself, how it moved, how it behaved, where it traveled, and how it could be manipulated. In the Pacific Northwest, the rain didn't just fall, it sculpted the world. Tribes learned to read clouds like books, sensing when a storm was preparing to shift direction. They positioned shelters under natural overhangs, angled entrances away from the dominant wind, and stacked cedar bark shingles so precisely that rainwater slid down them like layered armor. Some tribes built raised platforms inside their homes, knowing the earth would become mud after days of rain. Others dug drainage paths around their settlements, allowing streams of water to flow harmlessly away. These techniques weren't improvisations, they were the result of hundreds of years of observing the sky, memorizing patterns, and learning what trees, soil, and animals could reveal about incoming storms. One of the most remarkable strategies came from the Plateau tribes. When they traveled long distances during rainy seasons, they carried rain shields made from cattail reeds and tule plants. These shields weren't just umbrellas. They were lightweight, flexible, and designed to disperse water instead of collecting it. Travelers could walk for hours as rain beat down, yet their inner clothing stayed dry. It wasn't the shield alone, it was the understanding of how to angle it, how to tilt it with the wind, how to use the shape of the landscape to block the heaviest rainfall. There are legends of hunters who could track deer in rainstorms so heavy that even the animals struggled to move. The hunter stayed dry using cloaks woven from both plant fibers and animal hair, layered like armor plates. They moved silently, water rolling off them in sheets. Some elders said the rain itself respected those who knew its language. Even inside shelters, the battle against moisture continued. Fires were kept burning not just for warmth but to dry the air. Smoke seeped into clothing hanging above the flames, infusing the fibers with a natural water repellency. Smoked leather wasn't just a style, it was science. The aldehydes in smoke bonded with the hide, tightening its structure and giving it a resistance to water that modern tanning chemicals still struggle to imitate. Some tribes used a trick modern campers would appreciate, placing heated stones under sleeping mats. The stones radiated warmth for hours, keeping the ground dry and preventing moisture from creeping upward. Others lined the floors with layered cedar boughs, which stayed dry longer than ordinary leaves and released a clean, soothing aroma that kept insects away. Every tribe had its own method, shaped by climate, environment, and culture. And yet all shared the same idea: staying dry wasn't about fighting the rain, it was about working with it. Imagine a woman of the Haida tribe preparing her children for a journey. She lifts a cloak of woven cedar bark, soft as fabric after hours of careful pounding and soaking. Each fiber has been rubbed with oil. She layers the garments on her children, checks the seams, and smiles. Outside, the storm screams. Inside her home, the fire glows. When they step out into the world, the rain breaks on their cloaks like waves on a rock. They walk calmly, confidently, almost untouched by the storm. Some stories describe elders who could predict rain by watching the flight of birds or the movement of shadows on river surfaces. Others watched how certain plants folded their leaves or how the smell of the forest changed right before a downpour. Signs that modern people rarely notice told native families everything they needed to know to prepare, not with panic, but with wisdom. For some tribes, staying dry was even spiritual. Water was a sacred element, a symbol of life, cleansing, and renewal. Rain wasn't the enemy. It was a powerful force to be respected, acknowledged, and understood. The best waterproofing strategies didn't just come from survival. They came from living in harmony with the world. Days of endless rain were never a disaster. They were a challenge already solved by ancestors long before. A child growing up in a rainy forest village didn't fear the storm. They played under it, wrapped in garments that shed water effortlessly. Hunters returned from days-long journeys with dry tools. Elders sat by warm fires telling stories as winds howled. And when the rain finally stopped, and sunlight glimmered across the drenched world, everything smelled of cedar, smoke, and earth, proof of how deeply humans once understood the rhythms of nature. The rain didn't always arrive quietly. Sometimes it came with a roar so deep it shook the bark loose from cedar trees. When storms like these rolled across the plains or slammed into the coasts, even the bravest warriors paused to observe. The sky would darken until day looked like twilight, and the air smelled of wet stone and pine sap. But Native American tribes had learned long ago that the key to surviving endless rain wasn't brute strength. It was preparation and respect for every small detail of nature's behavior. Take the Chinook people, who lived along the Columbia River. Their world was often wrapped in fog, mist, and downpours so heavy travelers described them as sky rivers. Yet the Chinook wore capes woven from cedar bark that hung like layered armor. Each strip of bark was softened underwater, separated into thin fibers, and dried near fire smoke until it became both strong and flexible. These fibers, when woven tight and treated with oil, did not absorb water. They made it slide off, dripping to the earth without touching the skin underneath. A Chinook trader could paddle a canoe for hours while rain hammered down, and his shoulders would remain dry. The children of these tribes learned waterproofing from their earliest years. Young girls practiced weaving mini cloaks for dolls, learning which fibers resisted moisture best. Young boys were taught how to spot trees that produced the richest, stickiest resins. The knowledge wasn't taught through lectures, it was passed through hands, eyes, and imitation. Watching a mother rub warmed bear grease onto a cloak was as natural as watching her cook a meal. Survival knowledge flowed through families like blood. And when storms lasted not hours but days, sometimes stretching into weeks, entire villages shifted into rain mode. There was a rhythm to these seasons. Food stores were checked. Tools were treated with oils. The strongest cedar planks were placed on roof angles where rain struck hardest. Even the smallest cracks in a home were sealed with moss pressed tightly between wooden beams. That moss, mixed with resin, swelled in the rain and became even more watertight, nature's own expanding sealant. Travel during long storms wasn't avoided, it was adapted. In the northeastern forests, the Iroquois made travel cloaks out of animal hide lined with soft fur. But the hides weren't left raw. They were smoked over slow-burning fires for days. The process bonded the smoke chemicals with the hide, creating a tight, water-resistant surface. When rain hit smoked leather, it didn't seep in. It rolled away like droplets on polished stone. Some tribes even designed their shelters so that rain helped them rather than hindered them. In the northwest coast longhouses, water ran down the slanted roofs into carved wooden gutters, feeding into barrels or flowing back toward gardens. Rainwater was collected for drinking, washing, and even blessing rituals. For the Makah and Nuuchanoth, the sound of rain on roofs wasn't something to fear. It was a reminder that the world was doing exactly what it should. Inside the shelters, drying was an art. Fires were never allowed to fully extinguish during rainy seasons. Even when families slept, the embers glowed beneath layers of ash, ready to be stirred into flame at a moment's notice. Clothing hung above these coals on cedar racks. As the smoke rose, it curled into the fibers of garments, tightening them and strengthening their resistance to moisture. The scent of smoked clothing became a symbol of readiness, like a quiet badge of survival. Hunters moving through the mountains had yet another secret, layering with nature itself. They used the hollow bark of certain trees as emergency covers, stripping wide sheets that acted like rigid shields against downpours. Others used large leaves that naturally repelled water, stacking them in overlapping layers around their shoulders. Modern rain ponchos mimic this same idea, but native tribes perfected it centuries earlier simply by watching how forests protected themselves during storms. There are accounts of tribes that used clay mixtures to seal the outer edges of their shelters. When rain hit the clay, it hardened further, forming a protective shell. The ground inside stayed warm, insulated, and dry, even when the world outside turned to mud. In regions where rain turned earth into deep pools, homes were built slightly raised, supported by stones or wooden stilts. By lifting themselves just inches off the ground, families avoided moisture that would seep up from below. One of the most incredible adaptations, though, came from tribes of the far north and far west, communities that used animal fat lamps not just for light but as moisture control. These lamps burned clean and hot, drying the air inside shelters and preventing dampness from settling into clothing or blankets. When storms lasted long enough to chill even the strongest hunters to the bone, these lamps kept everyone's garments dry and warm. Imagine a night deep in the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. The sky is black, the trees sway like giants whispering warnings, and the rain falls in roaring sheets. A hunter returns from the forest, his cedar bark cape glistening but dry underneath. He steps into his longhouse, the fire flickering gently. Children sit wrapped in blankets treated with animal grease, playing with carved wooden toys. The hunter hangs his gear above the smoke. Slowly, the scent of resin, wood, and earth fills the room. Outside, the world is storm-wild. Inside, the world is steady, dry, safe. Even travel across rivers in endless rain had its own brilliance. Kayaks and canoes were waterproofed with layers of resin and animal fats, creating vessels capable of slicing through waves without taking on water. Hunters could travel for hours with only the rhythm of paddles breaking the storm's noise. Their clothing protected them, their boats kept them steady, and their knowledge of currents guided them home. Tribal elders often told stories that explained rain in spiritual terms. Some believed the rain cleansed the earth, preparing it for new growth. Others saw storms as the sky speaking to the people. Respecting rain wasn't just about staying dry. It was about understanding that nature had its own voice and purpose. And when you respected nature, nature protected you. There were times when rain became so relentless that the forest floor transformed into a wet labyrinth of streams and puddles. Yet hunters and gatherers continued their work. They stepped on exposed roots, rocks, and elevated paths that generations had memorized. They moved with a confidence that came from living inside rain rather than trying to escape it. And so the storms continued, hour after hour, day after day, night after night. And through it all, the people remained dry, resilient, and deeply connected to the land that shaped their identity. The deeper the rain season grew, the more the land changed its character. Forest trails that once felt firm underfoot turned into weaving streams. Moss swelled on tree trunks until they looked wrapped in soft green blankets. The sound of raindrops beating against leaves became so constant that people stopped noticing it. But Native American tribes did not fear these transformations. They studied them. They knew exactly which trees shed water the fastest, where the earth rose slightly above the flood lines, and which plants remained strong even under constant downpours. Among the most skilled rain readers were the Salish people. They lived in regions where rain sometimes lasted 30 days without pause. They had developed a kind of instinct, something beyond simple observation. They could tell when a storm was lightning by the way mist shifted between the trees. They knew rain would grow heavier when distant thunder vibrated through the ground rather than the air. Stories told that some elders could even smell the change of storm intensity, identifying subtle scents of wet cedar or river swell long before the sky responded. During long hunting trips, Salish warriors wore layered capes made from cedar bark lined with deer hide. They weren't just wearing clothing, they were wearing a system designed by centuries of refinement. The outer cedar layer deflected rainfall, the inner hide captured warmth, and thin layers of smoke treatment sealed the fibers together. When a warrior ran through the forest, raindrops didn't cling to his clothing. They slid, rolled, and fell away, leaving him dry enough to crouch, crawl, and climb without discomfort. Meanwhile, in the eastern forests, longhouses stood as masterpieces of waterproof engineering. Their arched frames, constructed from bent saplings, created natural domes where rain rolled off easily. Bark sheets overlapped like scales of a giant wooden serpent. The structure was so tight that heavy rains could hammer down for days, and yet inside, warriors sharpened blades, women wove baskets, and elders recited stories without a single drop touching the floor. Some explorers wrote later that stepping into a well-built longhouse during a storm felt like stepping into another world, one where the rain simply didn't exist. There was a remarkable trick used by the woodland tribes, the double wall barrier. They sometimes built an outer shell of bark around their houses, leaving a narrow space, only a few inches, between the outer bark and the inner living walls. When rain hit the outer shell, it trickled downward through this small empty space and drained into the ground. The inner wall, untouched by rain, stayed bone dry. Modern architects still use this method in high-end buildings, calling it rain screen systems. Yet native tribes were doing it centuries ago, guided only by experience and intuition. Some tribes also used animal sinew threads so tight they behaved almost like waterproof seals. When sewn into clothing, these threads shrank slightly when wet, tightening seams even more. A hunter caught in sudden rainfall didn't worry about water sneaking in through tiny holes. His own clothing tightened its protection automatically. When the rain seasons turned severe, communities came together in a coordinated effort. Hunters brought home extra firewood, knowing it must dry before the storm's peak. Women prepared waterproof blankets for infants by rubbing them with warm fat until they became smooth and slick. Families who lived near the coast gathered kelp leaves, which they dried and wove into temporary rain covers that were astonishingly effective. Even children took part, collecting moss and clay to help repair any cracks in the housing walls. One of the most mesmerizing techniques came from tribes of the Great Lakes region. They created birch bark coverings that were practically nature's version of laminated waterproof sheeting. Birch bark was peeled in thin, wide sheets, each one naturally coated with oils that repelled water. These sheets were layered over homes and secured with flexible roots. When rain came, the bark shingles shrugged it off effortlessly. Families lived inside structures that stayed dry even in the heaviest storms. The birch bark canoe, already famous for its lightweight design, was also proof of waterproof mastery. Waterproof seams were created using heated pine pitch mixed with crushed charcoal. The mixture cooled into a tough, rubber-like substance that sealed every line. Even through waves, storms, and river currents, the canoes stayed dry enough to carry goods, furs, and entire families safely. As storms continued for days, the forest itself seemed to breathe with the rain. Leaves dripped in unison, roots channeled water into natural trenches, and rivers swelled with a deep, steady rhythm. For tribes who traveled often, mobility was essential. So they built footwear designed for mud, rain, and slippery terrain, soft-soled moccasins treated with oils that resisted moisture while gripping wet earth. Some moccasins had removable inner linings of rabbit fur, which dried quickly near fire heat even after long days of travel. In the far west, the Nez Perce had their own brilliant method of staying dry. They constructed portable rain shelters out of willow frames covered with tule mats. Tule reeds, when woven tightly, naturally repelled moisture. These mats were easy to roll, carry, and assemble anywhere. Traveling groups could build a dry camp within minutes even under raging storms. The ease and efficiency of these shelters made them ideal for long journeys across varied terrain. Then there were the tribes who lived in open plains where storms came fast and violently. They used buffalo hides as natural rain barriers. A fresh buffalo hide, properly tanned, was almost impossible for water to penetrate. Plains tribes also understood how to position their teepees so rain slid down the outer layer and drained away from the entrance. The conical shape wasn't just aesthetically pleasing, it was intentional. The steeper the angle, the less water the structure absorbed. Even during relentless storms, families inside teepees sat warm beside their fires, untouched by the chaos outside. Inside a teepee, smoke from the central fire drifted upward through a vent at the peak. This constant smoke flow helped dry clothing hung on racks above. Hunters returning from rain-soaked journeys simply hung their garments near the vent, and within hours, they smelled of warm smoke and fresh resin, ready for the next day's travel. Some accounts describe elders teaching younger generations how to listen to rain. Not just hear it, but understand its texture, weight, and direction. A light rain made a soft tapping sound. Heavy rain produced a deeper, more rhythmic beat. And the sharp, needle-like rain driven by winds carried a distinct hiss as it sliced through tree branches. Children learned to identify these sounds instinctively, adjusting their shelter preparations accordingly. Rainproofing even extended to tools. Bows were stored in bark cases during storms to keep the wood from swelling. Arrow feathers were treated with oils to prevent clumping. Food was stored in raised caches, protected by layers of bark and hide that stayed dry even when surrounded by wet ground. And through all these practices, one truth remained constant: they did not fight the rain, they understood it. They lived with it, adapted to it, respected it. And in doing so, they mastered it in ways the modern world rarely appreciates. Storm after storm washed through the landscapes, and yet families remained dry, warm, and secure. Fires glowed inside shelters. Smoked hides hung like warm curtains. Water dripped harmlessly off rooftops. Children slept peacefully while thunder rolled like distant drums. Nothing, not even endless rain, could break their connection to the land. As the storms dragged on, the land entered a strange rhythm, almost as if nature itself had grown accustomed to the endless downpour. Rivers rose, lakes widened, and forests darkened beneath the unbroken canopy of clouds. In such a world, dryness was not an accident, it was a deliberate craft, a skill carved into culture. And tribes across the continent treated rain not as a threat, but as an old companion they knew how to tame. When families journeyed through forests drowned in rain, they walked with a calm confidence. The forest floor, softened by days of water, might swallow the steps of an untrained traveler. But Native American hunters had learned how to move lightly, stepping on fallen branches, roots, or stones that stayed just above the mudline. They seemed to glide rather than walk, their feet barely disturbing the soggy earth. Their dry moccasins, insulated by smoked hide and layered with fur, made almost no sound at all, a perfect advantage for hunters tracking prey even during the loudest storms. Some tribes developed special rain-walking techniques. Instead of lifting their feet high, which caused water to splash into clothing, they slid their steps forward slowly, letting the earth guide their movement. This style conserved energy and kept their garments untouched by mud. It also allowed them to travel faster through deep forest terrain than outsiders ever could. The deeper into the rainy season the world went, the more ingenious the tribes became. If a storm lasted long enough to soak every surface, people created drying stations, raised gravel patches surrounded by bark screens. These stations protected small fires from wind and provided a place to dry essential tools. A hunter might leave his bow or quiver hanging above slow-burning coals while he prepared food, trusting that the warmth would drive out any moisture that threatened to weaken the wood. In coastal regions, the sea and rain often collided in dramatic ways. Storms could whip waves into towering walls of water, drenching entire shorelines. Yet fishermen of the Pacific tribes ventured out in canoes coated with thick, glossy layers of pitch. This waterproof sealant was so expertly applied that water slid away as if repelled by an invisible force. Canoes glided across wild waters, their insides dry enough to carry baskets of food or bundles of trade goods without fear of damage. Fishermen wore cloaks made from woven spruce roots or reeds. These cloaks had a natural drape that channeled rainwater downward rather than inward. The fishermen's long hair, often treated with natural oils, repelled water the same way bird feathers do. Even their braids had purpose. Tightly woven hair prevented dripping water from running down their necks and soaking their clothing. Inside homes, families maintained a delicate balance between heat and humidity. Fires were kept steady but not so strong that they created excess moisture. Ventilation holes were adjusted depending on the storm's direction. If rain shifted to come from the east, elders instructed the family to cover the east-facing vents with bark or mats. If the wind changed again, the coverings were moved accordingly. These small adjustments kept shelters dry even when rain beat sideways or spiraled through sudden gusts. Children learned these techniques early. A young girl could tell just by touching a wall where more moss was needed. A young boy knew how to check if clothing had been fully smoked by the way it folded in his hands. Dryness was taught not with words, but with gestures. A wrinkle in a hide meant it wasn't finished. A heavy garment meant it had absorbed too much moisture. A smooth, warm surface meant the treatment was perfect. When tribes traveled in groups, they carried rain kits, bundles of essential waterproof materials. These kits included dried moss for sealing cracks, small packets of resin, strips of bark for emergency shelters, and tightly woven mats that could be unfolded into rain barriers within minutes. Every traveler carried at least one component, ensuring that the group could assemble protection anywhere they chose to stop. Some tribes turned rain itself into a tool. They placed carved wooden troughs outside their homes to direct water toward gardens. The water nourished medicinal plants, while overflow channels prevented flooding. Rainwater collected in stone basins was used for bathing, cooking, and washing hides before smoking them. Instead of fighting the endless downpour, they bent it to serve them. One tribe known for extraordinary water mastery was the Tlingit. They lived in regions where rainfall was among the heaviest in the world. And yet their garments, woven from the inner bark of red cedar and treated with fish oil, repelled water so effectively that the fabric felt almost rubber-like. A Tlingit rain cape shimmered during storms, droplets rolling across its surface as if animated. Elders told children that cedar was a living spirit, protecting them from the sky's tears. During trading expeditions, the Tlingit carried bundles wrapped in waterproof packets. Each packet was made from tightly folded bark sheets sealed with overlapping seams. Traders could cross ocean inlets, battle rain-filled winds, and still arrive with their goods completely dry. Outsiders marveled at their ability, wondering how such simple natural materials could outperform even modern cloth. Farther inland, tribes developed the earth mound technique to stay dry inside shelters. They built sleeping platforms raised off the ground with layers of packed earth beneath them. Even when rain soaked the soil outside, the dense earth beneath the platform stayed warm and dry. Some used heated stones under the platform for added warmth, turning their bedding into a dry, comfortable space even during weeks of rainfall. Elders often reminded younger generations that every part of nature could help them stay dry if they understood it. Pine needles shed water and made excellent roofing. Thick grasses woven into mats created flexible shields. Certain tree roots formed natural cords stronger than rope, useful for binding waterproof structures. Rain patterns were watched closely. Before a heavy burst, birds flew lower. Frogs grew louder. The scent of the forest deepened. Certain flowers closed tightly. These signs were more reliable than any modern forecast. When the signs aligned, tribes prepared quickly, even if the sky still seemed calm. And when the storm finally arrived, they were ready. In some regions, families sat around the fire telling rain stories. These tales weren't just entertainment, they carried coded survival knowledge. A story about a hunter trapped in a storm taught listeners how to find natural shelters. A tale about a girl who followed the rain to a hidden valley taught children to track water flow. Every narrative carried wisdom disguised as myth. Even ceremonies adapted to rain. Some tribes performed dances meant to honor storms, believing that respecting the rain kept it from becoming destructive. In these dances, people wore garments specially designed to shine under moisture, the water enhancing their appearance rather than harming it. Throughout all these practices, a central truth echoed generation after generation. Dryness is not a gift. It is a learned art. And Native American tribes perfected that art long before modern waterproof materials existed. As the rain pressed on without mercy, the world outside seemed to dissolve into a blur of gray and green. Trees swayed under the weight of water, branches dripping endlessly. Rivers expanded into the lowlands, turning familiar trails into winding streams. But inside Native American communities, life continued with a quiet steadiness, shielded by generations of knowledge that no storm could overpower. There was a particular calmness in the way they moved through the storm. Hunters walked with slow, deliberate steps, their feet landing softly on the wet earth. Women carried baskets covered with bark lids that shed rain as smoothly as bird feathers. Elders stood near the entrances of their shelters, observing the patterns of water running down the bark walls, noting how the flow changed with each shift of wind. To them, every rainfall was a lesson, every drop a messenger from the sky. In the Pacific Northwest, rain formed the heartbeat of the land. Entire ecosystems were shaped by moisture, and tribes adapted to it in ways that seemed almost magical. They built smoke lofts inside longhouses, raised platforms near the roof where air stayed warmest. Clothes hung there dried within hours even during the harshest storm. Hunters returning soaked from the forest would climb the ladder, spread their garments on the racks, and watch steam rise as heat pushed the rain back out of the fibers. Below the loft, the family fire glowed steadily, fed by resin-rich wood that burned hot even when damp. Cedar, in particular, was treasured because it lit easily and released a warm, sweet scent. The smoke not only dried clothing but also acted as a natural preservative, sealing fibers, tightening hide, and giving garments their distinctive waterproof finish. Travelers moving through long stretches of forest used rain shields crafted from giant leaves. These leaves, often from skunk cabbage or other broadleaf plants, were layered in a cascading pattern on a wooden frame. The overlapping design mimicked the feathers of a waterproof bird. Water rolled across the surface in thin streams, never pooling, never seeping in. Hunters could walk straight through sheets of rain without feeling more than a light mist against their skin. Some tribes even observed how certain animals stayed dry and adopted their techniques. Otters, for example, constantly groomed their fur with oils from their own skin. Inspired by this, tribes collected fish oils and animal fats to rub into their cloaks, turning them glossy and water-repellent. Ducks preened their feathers to stay buoyant and dry. Tribes mirrored this by applying oil to feathered garments worn during ceremonies and hunts. Watching animals was a form of education, a silent agreement between human and nature. Meanwhile, tribes of the Southwest, though known for dry climates, also had to face sudden seasonal rains. Flash storms could flood entire valleys, and so these tribes designed their dwellings with sloped plaster walls that shed water quickly. Natural plaster, made from clay and sand mixed with straw, hardened into a smooth, water-resistant surface. Even when the rain returned day after day, the walls held firm, directing water harmlessly to the ground below. Inside these shelters, the floors were often raised slightly above ground level. Beneath them were layers of stones and packed earth that prevented moisture from creeping upward. Even during long storms, the interiors stayed cool, dry, and comfortable. Families slept soundly while rain pounded against the outer walls like 1,000 drumbeats. In regions where forests were dense, people built rain corridors, narrow paths lined with large branches or bark slabs that diverted water to the sides. These corridors allowed travel between homes, storage pits, and cooking areas without soaking clothing. When storms grew too intense, entire villages used these covered paths to move safely and stay dry. In the Great Plains, where rainstorms could descend suddenly with fierce winds, tribes relied heavily on the engineering of their teepees. The poles were anchored deep and angled sharply so that rain slid down fast and clean. The buffalo hide coverings, treated with smoke and fat, became nearly impermeable during storms. Inside a teepee, families stayed dry even when lightning flashed and heavy rain rattled against the hides like stones. The central fire warmed the air, dried clothing, and kept spirits calm during the turbulent weather. Some tribes used heated stones wrapped in leather pouches to keep bedding dry. These stones, placed beneath blankets, radiated warmth for hours, preventing moisture from settling on sleeping areas. Even after long rainy nights, bedding remained dry and warm enough to let families wake with energy for the tasks ahead. When rainstorms darkened the skies for days, hunters formed rain teams, groups who traveled together for safety and efficiency. Each member had a role. One carried extra bark coverings, another kept the fire-starting kit dry, another monitored trails for flooding. These teams moved like a single organism, adjusting to the forest's rhythm, reading signs others might miss. A sudden silence in bird calls or a shift in wind direction meant they changed paths immediately. Their connection to nature was not spiritual alone, it was practical, necessary, and refined over generations. As nights grew colder during endless rain, tribes prepared warm sleeping shelters using thick reed mats laid over wooden frames. Moss stuffed between layers acted as insulation, trapping body heat and repelling moisture. These shelters felt almost like cocooned havens, warm, dry, and insulated despite the world outside being soaked to its core. Even more impressive was how tribes stored food in rain-heavy climates. They built raised storage caches on stilts with slanted roofs, ensuring that rain couldn't reach the food inside. The floors were made from interwoven sticks that allowed air circulation but blocked moisture. Inside, dried salmon, berries, nuts, and smoked meat stayed fresh for months. Food pipelines remained strong even when travel became difficult due to storms. Everything about their lifestyle showed an understanding modern societies rarely possess. They didn't make temporary solutions, they crafted permanent systems. Rain was not a surprise but a constant companion. And still, people laughed around fires, danced in ceremonies, taught children, told stories, sharpened tools, and prepared for the next day's tasks. Storm or no storm, life moved forward with incredible grace. Because to them, the rain was never the enemy. It was the sky speaking. The rain was not stopping. It wasn't slowing, it wasn't softening, just an endless curtain of water slicing through the forest. And in that suffocating darkness, young Greyhawk finally understood something. Staying dry wasn't just about comfort. It was about survival. Every drop that didn't reach his skin meant one more hour he could keep moving, keep thinking, keep living. His grandfather had once told him, "If you want to stay dry in endless rain, don't fight it. Learn to use it." Greyhawk didn't understand it back then. But now, wrapped in plant fiber layers that wicked water away, covered by a leaf-woven outer shield slicked with natural oil, he finally understood. He walked through the storm as if he walked under his own private sky. Rain hammered the earth, the trees, the rocks, but somehow not him. The group moved in formation, elders in front, trained scouts just behind them, the newer youths in the middle, and the smallest children at the back, carrying tiny bundles wrapped in hide. The children practiced unfolding leaf shields, listened to the sound of wet branches to judge distance, and sniffed the shifting air for the scent of animals. The storm erased sight, but it never erased knowledge. Then suddenly, Greyhawk froze. Through the thick curtain of rain, something drifted on the wind. Something impossible. Smoke. Not the scent of wet earth or rotting bark. True smoke. Fresh. Warm. Human. He signaled the others. The world grew still. Even the children held their breath. His grandfather knelt on the wet earth, pressed his hand into the mud, closed his eyes, and listened, not with his ears, but with the ground. After a moment, he whispered, "The fire is close. And it is not ours." A murmur spread through the group. Fire in this weather shouldn't exist, unless someone was desperate enough to protect it with everything they had. Lost traders? A rival tribe? Hunters on the run? "Desperate men," the old man said, "are more dangerous than enemies." Greyhawk swallowed hard. They were not just walking into rain now. They were walking into someone's last hope. They followed the scent, moving silently, melting into the trees. Rain battered the leaves above them, yet not a sound came from their feet. The closer they came, the stronger the smell grew. And finally, through a break in the foliage, they saw it. A crude wooden shelter on top of an old stone mound, triangular roof, smoke curling outward, flames fighting the rain with stubborn brilliance. It didn't belong to any tribe in this region. It was too rough, too quickly assembled. Someone had built it because they had no other choice. Inside the shelter sat a man. Greyhawk's stomach tightened. The man's clothing was foreign, fabric soaked through, modern boots heavy with mud. His hands shook as he stretched them toward the fire. His hair was dripping, his lips pale, and the fear on his face was unmistakable. "He is not one of us," the grandfather whispered. "A traveler lost in the old forest. A traveler who would die tonight if left alone." The old man stepped forward, raising his hand. The group rose behind him like silent shadows. The rain hissed louder, almost as if trying to warn the stranger. The man lifted his head slowly, eyes wide, terrified, shivering. The elder spoke gently. "You have lost your way. We will teach you how to stay dry in this rain. But first, you must listen to our story." The man swallowed, nodding weakly. And on that storm-soaked night, beneath a roof that shouldn't have survived the weather, began the tale of how the native peoples didn't fight the rain. They mastered it, lived with it, studied it, and used it to survive for days when no sun ever broke the sky. The man's breathing was shallow, almost frantic, as if every ounce of warmth from the fire might slip away at any moment. Greyhawk stepped closer, and the stranger flinched. His fingers tightened around his soaked jacket as though it were the last thing keeping him alive. The elder breathed slowly, letting the stranger feel the calm before he spoke again. "Rain is not your enemy," he said softly. "But if you fear it, it will swallow you whole." The man blinked, confused, exhausted, and freezing. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. Please. I didn't know where to go. My GPS died. My phone got soaked. I tried to follow the trail back, but... His voice broke. Everything disappeared in the rain. Greyhawk understood. The forest had a way of swallowing paths, even for those who lived there. But for an outsider? Endless rain turned every tree into a stranger, every step into a gamble. The elder nodded slowly. We will help you. But listen well, because the rain listens too. Greyhawk lowered himself beside the fire. He noticed the man's boots. The leather was ruined, the stitching unraveling. The water had seeped so deep into the fabric that every step must have felt like walking with stones tied to his feet. You have nothing that keeps water away, Greyhawk said quietly. Your clothes drink the rain. The man looked down at himself helplessly. The elder signaled to the youths. Two of them stepped forward and placed a bundle before the fire. Greyhawk opened it, a folded layer of inner bark fibers, woven so tightly it felt like soft rope. Another layer made from dried grass, stitched with vine thread. And finally, the outer layer, large, waxy leaves treated with natural oils that caused water to bead and slide off instantly. The man stared at it as though he had been handed a treasure. This, he whispered, keeps you dry? 4 days, Greyhawk replied. Even in storms that drown rivers. The elder pointed to the forest beyond the shelter. Our people traveled through rains that lasted weeks. The sky would not break. The ground would not dry. Animals vanished. Trails washed away. In those times, staying dry wasn't survival, it was freedom. The stranger looked from the layers to Greyhawk's own clothes, and only now noticed that despite the storm, Greyhawk wasn't dripping at all. His hair was damp, yes, but his shoulders, chest, and arms? Completely dry. How is that even possible? The man breathed. Greyhawk smiled faintly. Because we do not wait for the rain to stop. We prepare for the rain that never stops. The elder motioned toward the doorless opening of the shelter. The rain teaches many lessons. Would you hear the first? The man nodded weakly. The elder spoke. Water falls. It does not rise. Make its journey easy, and it will leave you untouched. Greyhawk gently lifted the outer leaf layer and draped it across the man's shoulders. The leaves shimmered, oil-slick and smooth. Rain landed on them and rolled off instantly, forming perfect silver beads that slid away like quicksilver. The man's eyes widened. It doesn't even soak in. That is the point, Greyhawk said. Rain wants to go down. Help it go down. The next layer, woven bark, was wrapped around his torso. It was warm, surprisingly light. This, Greyhawk explained, keeps your body heat trapped. Even if the outer layer is struck by rain, this one stays warm. The man exhaled sharply, as if he had forgotten what warmth felt like. His shivering slowed. The elder leaned closer. Your tools failed you. Machines die in the rain. Batteries drown. But the forest gives us what survives the storm. The stranger nodded slowly, tears mixing with the rain still clinging to his face. Greyhawk looked at him with steady eyes. Tonight you will learn not just how we stayed dry, but how we lived through storms that swallowed the earth. But understand this, once you learn, you must respect the knowledge. Many who did not, never made it out. The fire crackled. The rain outside roared louder. The man swallowed hard. I'm ready, he whispered. The elder gave a single slow nod. Good. Because the second lesson begins now. The fire crackled louder as if it, too, wanted to speak. Outside, the rain hammered against the shelter roof in a steady, merciless rhythm, like 1,000 drummers warning the forest that night had no mercy left to give. The stranger, still shivering, still recovering, slowly brought his hands closer to the warmth. Steam rose from his soaked clothes as the heat touched them, curling upward like ghostly threads. His breathing eased, but his eyes were fixed on the elder with the kind of attention born only from desperation. The elder waited, letting silence settle. Then he spoke. The second lesson: never let the rain choose your path. If you do, it will drown you long before the water touches your skin. Greyhawk watched the man's puzzled look, and he understood why. Outsiders always thought they could follow trails, maps, or devices, until the forest washed those illusions away. The elder pulled a thin branch from the wall of the shelter. It was long, slightly curved, and stripped of bark. With his knife, he made a soft scraping sound on the wood, each stroke deliberate. When we travel in endless rain, the elder said, we do not look for the path. We listen for it. The man blinked. Listen? To what? Greyhawk leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret hidden from the rest of the world. To the land itself. The shape of the sound tells us where the danger lies. The forest sings differently when rain falls on mud, on stones, on animal burrows, on hollow roots. It even sings differently where water gathers, and where death waits. A gust of wind swept rain sideways into the shelter. The stranger flinched, but Greyhawk only tilted his head slightly, closing his eyes. He murmured, the wind is shifting to the west. The river is rising. The man stared at him. How do you know that just from the rain hitting the wall? Greyhawk opened his eyes calmly. Because the rain never lies. You only need to understand what it is telling you. The elder smiled faintly, pride flickering in his eyes. Greyhawk continued. When the storm is this strong, every sound becomes a map. A heavy drop tells you where the branches are thickest. Soft patters show where ground is mossy. Hollow echoes come from fallen logs. And when the sound becomes muted, muffled, almost swallowed. He paused. That is where the earth is weak. The stranger felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. What happens there? You sink, Greyhawk whispered. Sometimes only your foot. Sometimes your entire body. The forest decides. The stranger swallowed hard. The elder finally set the carved stick onto the fire, letting it slowly burn from one end. In the old days, he said quietly, storms lasted so long that even the bravest hunters feared losing their way. The world turned to water. Footsteps disappeared within seconds. Trees uprooted overnight. Entire hunting parties vanished in places they had known their whole lives. The fire snapped loudly. The stranger jumped. Greyhawk watched him carefully. His fear wasn't weakness, it was understanding. That was good. Understanding meant he might live to see sunlight again. The elder continued. When the rains came for weeks, sometimes months, the sky never broke. No stars. No moon. No shadows. Only darkness and sound. The animals moved differently. The rivers grew teeth. And the only way to stay alive was to read the rain like a book. The man wiped water from his eyelashes. But how? How can you read something that's just falling water? Greyhawk smiled softly. Because each drop tells a story. He stood up, moved toward the edge of the shelter, and stepped 1 foot into the curtain of rain. Not fully outside, just enough to let the rain hit one side of his body. The outer layer of leaves shimmered as the droplets rolled off like silver marbles. Listen, he said. The man listened. At first, all he heard was noise, constant, unbroken noise. The sound of water hitting everything. Water on leaves. Water on wood. Water on mud. Water on stone. A chaos of wet sound. But Greyhawk shook his head. Listen again. He lifted his hand to guide the man's focus. Here, Greyhawk said softly. The drops falling straight down are sharp. Clean. That means the canopy is thin. He shifted a few inches. Here the sound softens. That means leaves are filtering the drops. He moved again, just slightly. And hear that? A deep, hollow thump. The stranger nodded. That's different. That, Greyhawk said, is a hollow root system. The ground beneath it is soft. If you step there, you will sink. The man felt his skin tighten. The forest wasn't just rain, it was alive, shifting, breathing beneath them. The elder stepped beside Greyhawk. When we travel, he said, we move with the rain, not against it. We let it reveal the land. And when the land speaks, we listen like our lives depend on it. Greyhawk added quietly. Because they do. The man exhaled shakily. I never knew the forest could be this dangerous. The elder looked at the darkness beyond the shelter. Most people fear the wolves, the bears, the storms, he said. But those are honest dangers. The rain is different. It hides the real danger, silence. The man frowned. Silence? Greyhawk stepped in front of him, leaning close enough for the firelight to reflect in his eyes. When rain falls harder and suddenly becomes quiet, he whispered, it means something large is moving through it. The stranger felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. He stuttered, large, like what? Greyhawk didn't blink. Like something watching you. The man's breath caught in his throat. The elder walked back toward the fire, sitting slowly. The third lesson, he said, is about the creatures who follow the storm. But that lesson is longer and more dangerous. Greyhawk took his place beside him, eyes still fixed on the forest as if expecting movement. The man drew back, heart pounding. He whispered, what kind of creatures? The elder's voice dropped so low that even the fire seemed to lean in to hear. Sit. Warm yourself. And listen carefully, because you have already smelled one. The stranger froze. Smelled one? He whispered. Greyhawk nodded. The scent you thought was smoke was not only smoke. The man swallowed hard, his pulse racing in his ears. Then, what was it? The elder stared into the flames. A wet predator, he said. One that hunts only during storms. The man's face strained of color. Greyhawk lowered his voice to barely more than a breath. And it is closer than you think. The man sat frozen, unable to decide whether the fire was warming him or the elder's words were chilling him again. The rain outside grew louder, smashing against the shelter like a wall of water determined to break in. The stranger's eyes darted from the fire to the darkness beyond the entrance. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind felt like breath. Greyhawk didn't look away from the rain. He whispered, the creature has been following you for hours. The man's heart nearly stopped. Following me? The elder nodded slowly, his voice steady, calm, but grave. It smelled your fear. Your wet clothes. Your confusion. Storm hunters always follow the weakest scent first. The man's blood ran cold. Storm hunters? What are those? The elder leaned back, letting the fire's glow flicker across his weathered face. You met the storm, he said. But you have not yet met those who worship it. Greyhawk stepped forward again, staring into the forest with the focus of a hunter listening for a breath in the dark. In our stories, he said, we call them rainwalkers. Animals that should fear storms, but instead they wait for them. Live for them. Hunt in them. The man swallowed. His voice cracked. But why would anything hunt in weather like this? Greyhawk's eyes narrowed. Because the rain hides everything, including them. The stranger felt a sinking dread. What do they look like? The elder did not answer immediately. He stared into the fire, as if the flames held memories he wished he could forget. Long, he finally said. Taller than any man. Thin but powerful. Their bodies bend like wet branches. Their skin glistens like river stones. And their eyes. He paused. Their eyes reflect lightning, even in darkness. The man trembled. You're saying something like that is out there, right now? Greyhawk slowly nodded. You walked through their hunting ground alone, in soaked clothes, with no cover, no silence. You made enough noise for them to follow you for miles. The man felt faint. His breaths came shallow and fast. But I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. Greyhawk's voice softened. That is why they survive. Storm hunters do not chase. They wait. They watch. They listen for footsteps that do not belong to the rain. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the ground beneath them. The man flinched violently. The elder turned toward him. Calm yourself. If it wanted you dead, you would not be sitting here. The stranger stared, confused and terrified. Then, why didn't it attack me? The elder poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling upward. Because it was not sure if you were prey, or if you were being protected by us. The words hit the man like a blow to the chest. You mean, it followed me all the way here? Greyhawk nodded again. It knows you are with us now. That is why it has not stepped closer. The man's eyes filled with fear. So it's still out there? Greyhawk did not answer at first. He simply turned his head slightly, listening, truly listening, to the rain. Then he spoke. Yes. The man's throat clenched. Can it get in here? Greyhawk didn't turn. If it wants to. The stranger's heart nearly stopped. Then why hasn't it? The elder answered calmly. Because something stronger than rain, stronger than fear, stronger even than predators, is keeping it away. The man felt impossible hope rise inside him. What is that? The elder looked directly at him. Our presence, he said. Our knowledge. Our silence. Predators do not attack what they do not understand. Greyhawk added. And rainwalkers fear us more than they fear lightning. The stranger blinked. Why? Greyhawk stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. Because we know the one thing they do not expect humans to know. The man leaned in, breath trembling. What's that? Greyhawk said. How to hunt in the rain. Lightning flashed outside, bright, white, violent, illuminating the forest for a split second. And in that split second, the man saw it. A tall, crooked shape far beyond the trees. Still. Watching. Almost human. Almost shadow. Almost unreal. The lightning faded. Darkness swallowed the forest again. The man staggered backward, gasping. I saw something, someone, something standing out there. Greyhawk nodded without surprise. Yes. Now it knows you have seen it. The man's breath shook violently. What do we do? What if it comes closer? The elder's voice deepened. Then you must learn the third lesson, the one that kept our ancestors alive in rains that drowned entire valleys. The shelter grew silent. Even the rain seemed to soften, as if listening too. The elder leaned forward. The storm hides the hunter, but it also hides the hunted. If you wish to live, you must disappear into the rain. The stranger blinked. Disappear? How? Greyhawk stepped past him, picking up a bundle of dark, soaked bark and crushed leaves. He said quietly, With this, and with silence, and with the forest as your shield. The man swallowed hard. What does that mean? Greyhawk met his eyes. It means if the rainwalker steps closer. He paused. You will vanish before it sees you. The fire crackled. Thunder rolled again. The creature outside moved, just a whisper, but a whisper in the wrong moment can be louder than a scream. The man's pulse pounded. The elder stood, his shadow towering across the shelter wall. "Sit," he commanded. "Listen to the storm. Learn the lessons. The night is long, and the creature is patient." Greyhawk returned to the entrance, blade in hand, watching the darkness with ancient calm. The rain grew heavier. The storm deepened. And the third lesson began. The stranger sat on the wet wooden floor, shivering, but this time not entirely from the cold. Every fiber of his being felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the forest itself had laid hands upon him. Greyhawk adjusted the leaf cloak around his shoulders and motioned toward the bundle of bark and crushed leaves. "Take it," Greyhawk said, voice steady. "This is your armor. Not metal, not fire, rain itself is your shield now." The man hesitated, glancing at the strange bundle. It smelled earthy, wet, almost alive. When he wrapped it around himself, pressing it to his clothes, he realized the water began to slide off in thin silver ribbons. Even his soaked jacket felt slightly drier, almost like magic. "The forest teaches patience," the elder said, his eyes fixed on the dark tree line. "And patience is the only weapon that works against what comes in endless storms." Outside, the rain intensified. Lightning split the sky, followed by a thunderclap that shook the ground beneath the shelter. For a brief moment, the stranger caught a glimpse of the creature, a twisted silhouette in the distance, unnervingly human yet impossibly alien. Its eyes glimmered, reflecting the lightning in a way that made the stranger's stomach knot. Greyhawk leaned closer. "Do not run. Do not panic. Every step you take, every breath you make, will be read by the Rainwalker. It listens to water, wind, and fear alike. If you move like the forest moves, it will lose you." The man swallowed, feeling the weight of his own heartbeat. He wanted to flee, to escape into the wet chaos of the forest, but Greyhawk's eyes held a calm authority that forced him to stay still. The elder picked up a small wooden whistle, carved with intricate grooves. "This is the wind call," he said. "It is not a weapon, but a message. When the storm is too loud, you use it. It tells the Rainwalker you are not prey, that you are under protection." Greyhawk took a deep breath and stood. "We leave in silence," he said. "The path is narrow, but the forest guides those who listen." The stranger felt every nerve on edge as Greyhawk led him to the shelter's opening. The wind lashed against his wet clothes, and the forest seemed to loom larger than life, every tree a potential hiding place for the predator. He could see the dark shape moving again, fluid, patient, almost blending with the rain itself. The elder's voice came softly behind him. "Step lightly. Let the rain carry your steps. The water is your ally. Do not disturb it more than it disturbs you." Greyhawk bent low, placing his hands on the slick forest floor. He felt the vibrations beneath the mud, the subtle shifts of branches above, the flow of water through tiny rivulets. Every detail whispered warnings. Every subtle movement told a story the stranger could barely comprehend. "Do you feel it?" Greyhawk asked, glancing at him. "The forest has a rhythm. Your footsteps must match it. Too loud, too fast, and it will find you." The stranger nodded, heart hammering. He crouched low, pressing bark and leaves to his back, feeling the wet forest smell fill his senses, damp soil, broken wood, rotting leaves, and distant smoke. He realized the smell itself could betray him, or protect him, depending on how he moved. They stepped forward, one careful foot at a time. Water pooled around roots and rocks, but their steps were deliberate, almost imperceptible. The Rainwalker watched. Greyhawk could feel it, though he never looked directly. It was a predator unlike any other, silent, methodical, unrelenting. Thunder rolled again, and lightning illuminated the forest just long enough for the stranger to see the creature pause. Its form stretched impossibly, arms bending at angles no human arm should bend, eyes glinting with something more ancient than memory. Yet when the rain drowned the next sound, it vanished. The stranger's pulse raced. He wanted to scream, but the fire inside the shelter, the lessons of the elder, and Greyhawk's calm authority kept him silent. He realized then that staying dry was not enough. Survival depended on understanding the storm, moving with it, becoming part of it. Greyhawk whispered, "Do not fear it. Fear is louder than rain. Fear betrays you. If you can match the storm's rhythm, you will disappear." They moved slowly, bending beneath branches heavy with rain, stepping over slick roots, letting water wash over them without letting it touch their skin too deeply. The stranger marveled at Greyhawk's mastery, how each step seemed effortless, each movement calculated, yet completely natural. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time lost all meaning in the endless rain. Every flash of lightning, every rumble of thunder, every movement in the shadow of the trees became part of a larger rhythm they were learning to follow. The Rainwalker remained close, its presence known only by tiny disturbances, ripples in the water, a branch bending slightly too far, a flash of movement that vanished before the eye could register it. Finally, the elder whispered, "The final lesson, in endless rain, the forest itself becomes your shield. You are not alone. You are part of it. The storm carries you, hides you, and if you learn to listen, you survive." The stranger, soaked and trembling, nodded. He could barely speak, but he understood. Survival wasn't about avoiding the rain. It was about becoming one with it, reading its voice, respecting its rhythm, and letting it carry him rather than drowning him. Lightning split the sky again, and the Rainwalker shifted, but it did not strike. Greyhawk smiled faintly. "You see? It respects those who respect the storm." The stranger exhaled slowly, heart still racing. For the first time, he felt a strange confidence. He might survive this night, these hours of endless rain, these unimaginable predators. He might even walk out of the storm alive. The elder turned toward him, face glowing in the firelight. "Remember this night," he said. "When water falls without end, it is not a curse. It is a teacher. And if you listen, if you move like the forest, if you trust the rain, you will live when others perish." Outside, the storm roared on. Thunder shook the earth. Lightning danced across the treetops. And the Rainwalker lingered in the shadows, patient, silent, waiting. But it did not strike. Not yet. The stranger's muscles ached, but he forced himself to keep moving, matching Greyhawk's careful, deliberate rhythm. Every step was a lesson, the forest spoke, and he had to answer in silence. Leaves shivered under the downpour, their movement mimicking the predator's approach. Streams of water formed miniature rivers over the moss-covered roots, and each splash, each ripple, became a signal, something to watch, something to respect. Greyhawk paused suddenly. His hand lifted, signaling the stranger to stop. Both crouched low, shadows merging with the dripping forest. A branch above them creaked under the weight of rain, and the distant snap of a twig echoed unnaturally loud in the storm's chaos. The Rainwalker was near. The stranger's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to run, yet Greyhawk's calm authority forced him to remain still. He felt the forest press in from all sides, the rain, the mud, the trees. They were no longer obstacles but allies. Greyhawk whispered, barely audible over the storm. "Listen, it moves in patterns. Not randomly. Always around the weak, always around the fearful. It tests before it strikes." The stranger's ears strained. He could hear nothing but the relentless hammering of rain. Yet deep inside he felt a rhythm, a subtle shift in the air, a vibration beneath his feet. The Rainwalker was moving, stalking, observing, waiting for a mistake. Greyhawk continued. "When the forest is saturated, water becomes a shield. When fear overwhelms thought, water becomes a trap. Step with the forest, not against it. Move as it moves. Breathe as it breathes." The man nodded, though his teeth chattered. He could almost feel the predator's presence like a shadow brushing against his mind. Every instinct screamed danger, yet Greyhawk's calm made him understand that fear could betray him faster than the creature ever could. Lightning illuminated the treetops, revealing fleeting glimpses of the Rainwalker. Tall, impossibly thin, and impossibly fast, its elongated limbs bent at unnatural angles. Its eyes caught the light in sharp glints, and for a split second, the man thought he saw its mouth, a slit opening impossibly wide, whispering silent hunger. But before he could react, darkness swallowed it again. The elder's voice came softly from behind. Your mind will try to see it where it is not. Do not. Focus on the forest, on the rain, on the steps that carry you forward. It hunts by fear. If you are calm, it cannot touch you. The stranger swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. Each inhale was heavy with the smell of wet earth and crushed leaves. Each exhale fogged in the cold air, mingling with the steam rising from their soaked clothing. Every drop of rain was a drumbeat, each pulse a warning, move wisely. They advanced slowly, moving in near silence. Every rustle of leaves was calculated, every step placed deliberately over roots slick with mud. Tiny rivulets of water ran past their feet, and Greyhawk pressed his palms against the soft soil, feeling the vibrations, the subtle signs of movement, of predator, prey, and forest alike. Suddenly, a deeper, heavier sound rolled through the rain, a low, almost guttural hum. The rainwalker was closer, and it knew they had noticed. The man froze, panic threatening to take over. Greyhawk placed a hand on his shoulder. Breathe with me. Do not let the fear leak into the rain. If you do, it will smell it, and it will strike. The man obeyed, drawing in a deep, slow breath. He felt the wet leaves pressing against his back, the slick bark shielding him like armor, the forest itself cradling him in a rhythm that, for the first time, made him feel part of it. The elder spoke again. Now you will learn the fourth lesson. Survival is not just avoiding the predator. It is becoming invisible. Not to eyes, but to thought, to expectation, to fear itself. Tonight you vanish into the storm. Greyhawk nodded, leading the stranger to a shallow depression beneath a cluster of thick ferns and moss-covered roots. Here, he said, let the rain carry your shape. Let it hide you. Let your presence dissolve into the water, the earth, the leaves. The man crouched low, pressing his body into the hollow, covering himself with soaked bark and leaves. He felt the rain dripping over him, forming protective sheets, guiding him. The forest noises became a symphony, and in that moment, he understood, he was not hiding, he was becoming part of the storm. A shadow passed over them, a fleeting, elongated shape. The rainwalker had reached the spot where they had just been. It paused, sniffing the wet air, sensing, testing, waiting. But it did not strike. Greyhawk whispered in his ear. It cannot see what it cannot find. And we are not here. We are rain, forest, shadows, and silence. We are the storm. The man held his breath as the predator's eyes glinted faintly through the darkness. It moved with impossible grace, scanning, circling, then, slowly, almost reluctantly, retreating. The forest exhaled with them. Thunder rolled, rain splashed, but they remained unseen, untouched, alive. The elder's voice cut through the pounding rain. Do you understand now? This is why our people survived rains that drowned rivers, floods that erased paths, storms that lasted for weeks. The rain does not kill. It teaches. And only those who listen, move wisely, and respect it, survive. The stranger nodded, soaked to the bone, trembling, but alive. For the first time, he truly understood the forest, the rain, and the ancient wisdom that had protected these people for generations. Greyhawk stood, brushing off excess water, and extended a hand. Tonight you have not only stayed dry, you have become one with the storm. The man took it, trembling, exhausted, but filled with awe. Lightning flashed one more time, illuminating the rainwalker far in the distance, watching, patient, intelligent, yet defeated for now. The elder smiled faintly, as if a century of storms had passed in a single moment. And when the rain ends, he said quietly, you will carry these lessons with you. They are heavier than stone, sharper than blades, and stronger than fear. The rain continued to fall. Endless, relentless, unforgiving. And yet, for the first time that night, it felt like a teacher, not an enemy.